Laugh at our primitive spaceships again, you alien fucks, Aaron Lewis snarled, staring out at the gleaming armada of humanity's secret warships. Standing on the observation deck of Earth Defense Council headquarters, a flood of memories washed over him. It started when the Brunali arrived in Seoul, all arrogance and bluster. Led by that prick High Commander Indus, they mocked human spacecraft as children's toys. Indus made his ultimatum, Earth's unconditional surrender or annihilation, smug in his technological superiority. He gave humanity a month to comply, confident in an easy conquest. But Indus didn't know what humanity had been up to. For years, the EDF reverse-engineered crashed alien ships, unlocking their secrets. In hidden shipyards, Earth assembled a war fleet with advanced shields and weapons, undetectable to Brunali scans, powerful enough to blow those puffed-up peacocks out of the sky. Now, with the deadline upon them, Aaron gripped the datapad containing Earth's encrypted attack orders. One word from him, and hundreds of human ships would spring the trap, hitting the Brunali with everything they had. This was humanity's chance to seize their destiny among the stars. If they failed here, against the mighty Brunali war machine, Earth was doomed. "Max, get the fleet ready," Aaron called to his right-hand man. "It's time to show these alien bastards what humans can do. Let's send them crying back to whatever shithole they crawled out of." Max nodded, a predatory gleam in his eyes. He headed off to prep the ships and fighters. Aaron turned back to the window, watching the EDF fleet awaken, powering up for battle. Lights blinked on, engines hummed to life, weapon bays opened. A thrill ran through him. This was it, humanity's big moment. Time to step onto the galactic stage and take a piece of the action, by any means necessary. The EDF warships powered up, emerging from the shadowy side of Earth. Aaron barked the order to engage stealth mode. With a flicker, the fleet vanished from sensors, their advanced cloaking systems rendering them invisible to the Brunali. Aaron's flagship, the USS Retribution, led the charge. He leaned forward in his chair on the bridge, eyes locked on the tactical display. The human fleet closed in on the unsuspecting Brunali armada, moving into attack position. "Sir, we're in optimal firing range," the weapons officer reported. Aaron held up a hand. "Hold fire, let's get as close as we can before we tip our hand." The crew waited with bated breath, watching the oblivious enemy ships drift along. Suddenly, alarms blared on the bridge. A Brunali scout vessel had altered course, heading straight for their position. "Shit, they've detected something," Aaron cursed. "All ships open fire, hit them with everything we've got." The human fleet decloaked, weapons hot. Plasma torpedoes and particle beams streaked across the void, slamming into the Brunali ships. Their shields flared, buckling under the unexpected onslaught. Explosions blossomed along the alien hulls as several vessels burst apart. The Brunali fleet scattered, thrown into disarray by the ambush. Return fire splashed harmlessly off the human ship's advanced shielding. On the enemy flagship's bridge, Commander Indus gaped at the carnage. His primitive foes were tearing his ships apart. "Impossible," Indus sputtered. Rage contorted his features. "All ships focus fire on their flagship. Destroy that insolent human." A storm of Brunali weapons fire engulfed the Retribution. The deck shuddered beneath Aaron's feet, his ship's shields straining to hold back the deluge. Consoles sparked, and crewmen shouted damage reports, but he kept his eyes on the enemy fleet. The Brunali had numbers and raw power, but as the battle raged, their technological edge meant nothing. Terran ships danced circles around the alien vessels, pummeling them with precisely targeted strikes. Human tactics and resolve were winning the day. Aaron allowed himself a tight smile. The Brunali's hubris was their undoing. They'd underestimated humanity, and now they were paying the price. Just as victory seemed within grasp, the Brunali revealed a terrifying secret weapon. A colossal dreadnought, bristling with advanced weaponry, emerged from the wreckage of the alien fleet. As it powered up, a strange distortion rippled through space, tugging at the human ships. "Sir, gravitational anomalies are off the charts," the sensor operator yelled. "That thing's got some kind of gravity weapon." Aaron watched in horror as the dreadnought's pull intensified, dragging the EDF vessels towards its cavernous hangar bay. Alarms screeched, and the Retribution groaned, its hull creaking under the strain. "Divert all power to engines," Aaron barked. "We've got to break free." But it was no use. The dreadnought's gravity well was too strong, inexorably hauling the human fleet to their doom. Aaron slammed a fist on his armrest, mind racing. They couldn't fight this. But maybe. "Maverick," Aaron called over the comm, "I need you and your squad out there now. We've got one chance to stop this thing." "On it, boss," Jake Maverick Thompson replied, the grin evident in his voice. "We'll shove a gravity torpedo right up their ugly ass." Maverick and his hand-picked team of pilots sprinted to the hangar deck, leaping into their waiting fighters. The sleek ships rocketed out of the Retribution's launch bay, vectoring towards the Brunali dreadnought. "Activate stealth mode and arm the grav torps," Maverick ordered as they closed in. "Time to fight fire with fire." The fighters shimmered and vanished, disappearing from sensors. They wove through the chaos of battle, dodging enemy shots and the inexorable pull of the dreadnought's gravity well. As they neared the massive ship, its hull looming before them, Maverick gave the signal. "Punch it!" The fighters kicked into high gear, racing towards the dreadnought. At the last second they veered off, launching a volley of gravity torpedoes. The projectiles struck home, burrowing into the dreadnought's shields and hull. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a second gravitational distortion erupted around the alien ship, the GravTorp's miniaturized gravity generators coming online. The two opposing forces clashed, the dreadnought's pull neutralized by the counterpull of the human weapons. "It's working," Aaron exclaimed as the EDF fleet broke free of the gravity well. "All ships concentrate fire on that dreadnought." The human vessels unloaded everything they had, plasma torpedoes and particle beams hammering the Brunali ship's weakened shields. Explosions blossomed across its hull as the barrage tore through armor and vital systems. The dreadnought shuddered, racked by internal blasts, and began to break apart. Indus watched in disbelief as his ultimate weapon disintegrated, the last hope of Brunali victory evaporating before his eyes. His fleet lay in ruins, decimated by the humans and their accursed tactics. Rage and desperation consumed him, driving out all reason. "All remaining ships rally to me," Indus snarled, gripping the arms of his command chair. "We will crush these vermin under our hulls, full speed ahead." The battered remnants of the Brunali armada formed up around Indus's flagship, preparing for a final suicidal charge against the human fleet. As Indus's battered fleet charged forward, their weapons blazing in a final desperate assault, a chime sounded on the Retribution's bridge. Aaron spun to face the comms officer, a sense of foreboding rising in his gut. "Sir, we're picking up a distress call from the nearby Brunali colony of Zephyrus," the officer reported, her face grim. "They're under attack by a rogue Brunali faction. The colonists are requesting immediate assistance." Aaron frowned, torn. The colony had remained neutral, refusing to join Indus's crusade against humanity. Leaving them to fend for themselves felt wrong, but the EDF fleet was locked in a brutal slugging match with Indus's forces. Every ship counted. Gritting his teeth, Aaron made the call. "Patch me through to the fleet." The comms officer nodded, fingers flying over her console. "This is Admiral Lewis. The majority of the fleet is to continue engaging the Brunali forces. I'll be taking a task force to assist the Zephyrus colony. Hold the line until I return. Lewis out." Spinning on his heel, Aaron jabbed a finger at his XO. "Commander Nakamura, the ship is yours. Give Indus hell." Nakamura saluted sharply as Aaron strode off the bridge, already barking orders into his comm. Minutes later, a small force of EDF ships broke away from the main battle, rocketing towards Zephyrus. As they approached the colony, the situation became clear. A flotilla of ramshackle Brunali vessels swarmed around the planet, hammering at the colony's meager defenses. "Admiral, I'm picking up a transmission from the surface," the COMEM's officer reported. "It's from the colony's governor." "Put it through." Aaron leaned forward as a static-laced image formed on the view screen. A haggard Brunali in torn robes appeared, desperation etched on his face. "This is Governor Talos of Zephyrus Colony," the Brunali said, his voice strained. "To any ships receiving this message, we are under attack by the forces of Warlord Zoran. He means to punish us for our refusal to join the war against the humans." Talos's image flickered as an explosion rocked the room behind him. "Our defenses are failing. We cannot hold out much longer. Please, if anyone can hear us, we need help." Aaron clenched his jaw. "Governor Talos, this is Admiral Lewis of the Earth Defense Fleet. We hear you and we're on our way. Just hold on." As the task force entered orbit, dropships loaded with EDF Marines and armored vehicles launched from the ship's bays, screaming towards the colony. Aaron, not content to lead from the rear, boarded the lead shuttle. Time to get his hands dirty. The dropships touched down amidst the chaos of the colony's last stand. EDF Marines poured out, their advanced armor and weapons a stark contrast to the ragtag defenders. Aaron charged down the ramp, his rifle up and scanning for targets. All around him, the colony burned. Zoran's troops rampaged through the streets, cutting down anyone in their path. The EDF Marines wasted no time, laying down a withering hail of fire that sent the attackers scrambling for cover. Aaron led the charge, rallying the beleaguered colonists to fight alongside their unexpected human allies. The tide began to turn as EDF troops and Zephyrus defenders pushed back against Zoran's forces, their combined might shifting the balance. Amid the smoke and blood of the battle, a massive Brunali warrior emerged from the chaos, his armor stained with the blood of the fallen. Warlord Zoran himself, come to crush the resistance personally. The warlord's gaze fixed on Aaron, his eyes burning with hatred. "You hairless apes think you can interfere with Brunali affairs?" Zoran snarled, hefting a wicked-looking battle axe. "I'll splatter your primitive brains across this colony's walls." Aaron stepped forward, squaring off against the towering alien. "Big talk, Zoran, let's see if you can back it up." He raised his rifle, finger tightening on the trigger. With a roar, Zoran charged, moving far faster than any being his size had a right to. He swung his axe in a glittering arc, the razor-sharp blade a blur of motion. Aaron hurled himself aside, narrowly avoiding decapitation. The axe slammed into the ground, cleaving through concrete like paper. Rolling to his feet, Aaron snapped off a shot. The plasma bolt struck Zoran's armor, scorching the dense plating but failing to penetrate. The warlord laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "Pathetic." Zoran lunged forward, his axe whipping around in a deadly blur. Aaron ducked and dodged, his enhanced reflexes barely keeping him ahead of the onslaught. This wasn't working. Zoran's armor was too strong, his reach too long. Time for a change in tactics. Aaron holstered his rifle and drew a gleaming combat knife from his belt. If he couldn't outshoot the bastard, he'd have to get up close and personal. Zoran's eyes glinted with savage amusement. "So the primitive wants to dance." He spun his axe in a showy flourish. "Let's dance." The two warriors clashed in a whirlwind of steel and fury, human agility pitted against Brunali strength. Aaron ducked and weaved, his knife flashing out to score hits along Zoran's arms and legs, searching for weak points in the armor. But Zoran gave as good as he got. His axe carved glittering arcs through the air, coming within a hair's breadth of taking Aaron's head off. Sparks flew as the blade skittered off Aaron's armor, gouging deep rents in the hardened plating. Around them, the battle raged. EDF Marines and Zephyrus defenders fought side by side, driving back Zoran's troops meter by bloody meter. The tide had turned, the attackers now on the defensive. Aaron pressed his assault, his knife a blur of silver. He feinted left, then dove right, rolling under a whistling axe blow. Coming up behind Zoran, he slammed his knife into the warlord's unarmored back, driving it into the hilt. Zoran roared in pain, spinning around with stunning speed. His axe flashed out, catching Aaron in the side and sending him flying. Aaron hit the ground hard, the breath blasted from his lungs. His armor was cracked, blood seeping from the gash in his side. But Zoran was in no better shape. The warlord staggered, dark blood pouring from the wound in his back. He glared at Aaron with pure, undiluted hatred. You think this changes anything? Zoran snarled, his voice thick with pain. You've won nothing, human. This war has only just begun. With a final, defiant roar, Zoran raised his axe high and toppled backwards, the light fading from his eyes. The warlord was dead. Aaron hauled himself to his feet, grimacing at the pain lancing through his side. Around him the last of Zoran's troops threw down their weapons, surrendering to the victorious EDF Marines and Zephyrus defenders. Governor Talos emerged from the ruins of the colony's command center, his eyes wide with awe and gratitude. He approached Aaron, bowing deeply. "Admiral Lewis, we owe you and your people a debt we can never repay," Talos said, his voice thick with emotion. "You saved us from certain destruction. We were wrong about humanity. Your kind are not the savages we were led to believe." Aaron clasped the governor's shoulder, offering a tired smile. "No, Governor Talos, we're not savages. We're just people like you, trying to find our way in this crazy universe. Maybe it's time we started working together instead of fighting each other." As the governor nodded, a glimmer of hope in his eyes, Aaron's calm crackled to life. "Admiral Lewis, this is the retribution. We have an urgent situation developing with the Brunali fleet. Commander Nakamura needs you back ASAP." Aaron sighed, the weight of command settling back onto his shoulders. The battle was won, but the war raged on. "Understood, Retribution. I'm on my way." He turned to Talos, his expression serious. "Governor, I have to return to the fleet, but I'm leaving a contingent of Marines here to help with the rebuilding and to protect you from any further attacks. You're not alone anymore." Talos nodded, gratitude etched on his face. "Thank you, Admiral. We will not forget what you have done for us." As Aaron boarded the waiting dropship, the eyes of the Zephyrus colonists upon him, he couldn't help but feel a flicker of hope amid the darkness of war. Maybe, just maybe, there was still a chance for peace between their peoples. But first he had a war to win. Aaron burst onto the Retribution's bridge, his face grim as he took in the tactical display. The Eternal Conquest loomed before them, its hull pitted and scarred from the relentless exchange of fire. The Brunali flagship's shields flickered, on the verge of collapse, but still it fought on with a ferocity born of desperation and hatred. "Admiral, the Eternal Conquest is channeling all power to its weapons systems," the sensor operator reported, her voice tight with tension. "They're preparing for a final attack." Aaron's eyes narrowed as he studied the readouts. The Brunali ship's weapons glowed with an eerie, pulsating light, the telltale sign of an overload. If they unleashed that much raw energy, even the Retribution's advanced shields wouldn't withstand the onslaught. "Sir, our shields are at 30% and falling," the tactical officer warned. "We can't take another hit like that." Aaron's mind raced, searching for a solution. They couldn't outgun the Eternal Conquest, not with Indus pouring everything he had into this final, desperate gambit. But maybe, just maybe, they could outmaneuver him. "Deploy the nanobots," Aaron ordered, his voice calm and steady despite the chaos erupting around him. "Let's see how Indus likes a taste of his own medicine." The crew leaped into action, their fingers flying over consoles as they prepared to unleash their secret weapon, a swarm of self-replicating nanobots designed to infiltrate and disrupt enemy systems from within. It was a gamble, an untested technology that could just as easily backfire on them, but it was their only chance. "Nanobots away," the weapons officer reported, his face bathed in the eerie glow of his display. "They're penetrating the Eternal Conquest's hull now." On the viewscreen, the Brunali flagship seemed to shudder, its lights flickering as the nanobots spread like a virus through its systems. Consoles sparked and alarms blared, the ship's crew thrown into chaos as they fought to regain control. "It's working," someone shouted, their voice thick with relief. "Their weapons are offline, shields are failing." But Aaron didn't share in the crew's elation. His gaze was fixed on the Eternal Conquest, watching as the once mighty ship listed and drifted, its engines sputtering. Something was wrong. This was too easy. On the bridge of the Eternal Conquest, Indus raged and snarled, his eyes wild with madness. His crew cowered before him, their faces pale with fear as they struggled to contain the nanobot infestation. Systems failed and weapons misfired, the ship descending into anarchy. "You fools!" Indus roared, spittle flying from his lips. "I will not be defeated by these primitive apes and their tricks." He slammed a fist down on the console, the impact sending sparks flying. The ship shuddered, its lights flickering as the nanobots burrowed deeper into its core systems. "Commander, we're losing control," one of the crew pleaded, his voice trembling. "The ship is tearing itself apart." But Indus wasn't listening. His gaze was fixed on the viewscreen, on the hated human ship that had dared to defy him. They thought they had won, thought they could best the mighty Brunali with their clever little machines. They were wrong. "Divert all power to the engines," Indus snarled, his fingers flying over the console. "We'll ram them, tear their ship apart with our bare hands if we have to." The crew hesitated, their eyes wide with horror. To follow such an order was suicide, a final, futile gesture of defiance. But to disobey Indus was to invite a fate worse than death. With trembling hands they obeyed, pouring every last ounce of power into the Eternal Conquest's straining engines. The ship lurched forward, its hull groaning and buckling as it accelerated towards the Retribution. "Admiral, the Eternal Conquest is on a collision course," the sensor operator yelled, her voice edged with panic. "They're coming right for us." Aaron's heart seized in his chest, a cold realization washing over him. Indus wasn't trying to win anymore. He was trying to take them all down with him, to snatch victory from the jaws of defeat with one final, spiteful act. Aaron's eyes widened as he watched the Eternal Conquest lurch forward, its engines straining as it accelerated towards the Retribution. The Brunali flagship was a wounded beast, lashing out in its final moments, determined to take its tormentor down with it. "Hard to port," Aaron barked, his fingers flying over the console. "Divert all power to shields and thrusters." The Retribution shuddered as its engines roared to life, the ship banking sharply to avoid the oncoming collision. The two massive vessels passed within meters of each other, their shields sparking and flaring as they brushed against one another. On the bridge of the Eternal Conquest, Indus let out a howl of rage as his final gambit failed. His ship, once a symbol of Brunali might, was now a shambles, its systems failing, and its crew in disarray. Aaron saw his chance. "Lieutenant Chen, assemble a boarding party," he ordered over the comm. "We're going to take the fight to Indus." "Aye, sir," came the response. "We'll make him regret the day he picked a fight with humanity." Minutes later, a heavily armed squad of Marines led by Lieutenant Alex Razor Chen streamed out of the Retribution's airlock and onto the hull of the Eternal Conquest. Magnetic boots clamped onto the alien metal as the Marines advanced, their weapons at the ready. Razor signaled his team forward, his face grim beneath his helmet's visor. They had trained for this, drilled for countless hours in preparation for boarding actions like this one, but no amount of training could fully prepare them for the reality of combat against a desperate and cornered foe. As they breached the Eternal Conquest's hull and pushed into its labyrinthine corridors, the Marines were immediately met with resistance. Brunali crew members, some armed with little more than improvised weapons, threw themselves at the borders with suicidal ferocity. Razor and his team pushed forward, their pulse rifles barking as they cut down the defenders. The corridors were tight and winding, the perfect environment for ambushes and close-quarters fighting. The Marines advanced methodically, clearing each section before moving on to the next. Razor led from the front, his movements fluid and precise, honed by years of training and combat experience. His team followed close behind, covering each other's backs and working as a well-oiled machine. As they fought their way deeper into the ship, the resistance intensified. Brunali warriors, clad in heavy armor and wielding vicious-looking blades, charged the Marines head-on. The tight confines of the ship's corridors became a brutal killing ground, echoing with the clash of metal on metal and the cries of the wounded and dying. Razor found himself locked in a desperate struggle with a Brunali warrior, the alien's blade scraping against his armor as he fought to bring his rifle to bear. With a grunt of effort, he managed to kick the warrior back, buying himself just enough space to squeeze off a burst of fire that sent the Brunali tumbling to the deck, a smoking hole in his chest. "Keep pushing," Razor urged his team, his breath coming in ragged gasps over the comm. "We're almost to the bridge." On the Eternal Conquest's bridge, Indus paced back and forth like a caged animal, his eyes wild and his teeth bared in a snarl. His crew kept their distance, their faces a mix of fear and uncertainty as they watched their commander unravel before their eyes. "You!" Indus jabbed a finger at his tactical officer, his voice a harsh rasp. "Why haven't you destroyed that human ship yet? Are you incompetent or just a traitor?" The officer blanched, his hands trembling as he tried to form a response. "See, Commander, our weapons are offline, our shields are failing. We're barely holding together as it is." Indus's face contorted with rage. "Excuses," he bellowed, slamming his fist down on the console. "I am surrounded by weakness and treachery." He spun to face the rest of his bridge crew, his eyes blazing with paranoid fury. "You're all against me, aren't you? Plotting behind my back, conspiring with the humans to bring about our downfall." The crew exchanged nervous glances, torn between their loyalty to their commander and the growing realization that he had lost his grip on reality. Some shifted uneasily in their seats, their hands inching towards sidearms and hidden weapons. Suddenly the bridge doors exploded inward, torn from their hinges by a shaped charge. Razor and his marines poured through the breach, their weapons spitting fire as they fanned out to secure the room. Indus's elite guard, a hand-picked group of fanatically loyal warriors, surged forward to meet the boarders. They fought with a ferocity born of desperation, throwing themselves at the Marines with reckless abandon. Razor found himself in the thick of it, trading blows with a massive Brunali guardsman. The alien was fast and strong, his blows hammering against Razor's armor like a sledgehammer. But the Marine was faster, his reflexes honed by years of training and augmented by his powered suit. He ducked under a wild swing and drove his fist into the guardsman's midsection, the servos in his armor whining with the force of the blow. The Brunali doubled over, his breath rushing out in a grunt of pain. Razor followed up with a vicious uppercut that snapped the alien's head back, sending him crashing to the deck in a boneless heap. All around him, his Marines were engaged in similar struggles, their armor scorched and dented from the close-quarters fighting, but they were holding their own, pushing the elite guard back with a combination of superior training and sheer grit. Razor's eyes locked on Indus, who stood at the center of the bridge, his face a mask of rage and disbelief. The Brunali commander reached for his sidearm, his movements jerky and uncoordinated. Razor was faster. He raised his pulse rifle and fired a single precision shot that caught Indus in the shoulder, spinning him around and sending his weapon clattering to the deck. "It's over, Indus," Razor said, his voice hard and flat. "Surrender now and your crew will be spared." Indus staggered to his feet, clutching at his wounded shoulder. His eyes were wild and unfocused, darting from Razor to his own crew and back again. "Never," he hissed, his voice thick with pain and hatred. "I will never surrender to you, human. I would rather die than live to see the Brunali brought low by your kind." He lunged forward, his good hand scrabbling for his fallen sidearm. Razor watched him coldly, his finger tightening on the trigger of his rifle. The shot echoed through the bridge, loud in the sudden silence. Indus jerked and stumbled, a neat hole drilled through his forehead. He toppled backwards, his eyes wide and staring, a look of shocked disbelief etched on his face. Razor lowered his rifle, the barrel smoking in the dim light. He turned to face the remaining Brunali crew, who stood frozen in a mix of shock and fear. "Your commander is dead," he said, his voice ringing with authority. "Your ship is lost. Surrender now, and you will be treated with honor as prisoners of war." For a long moment no one moved. Then, slowly, the Brunali crew began to lay down their weapons, their faces etched with a mix of relief and resignation. Razor activated his comm, his voice steady and clear. "Admiral Lewis, this is Lieutenant Chen. The Eternal Conquest is secure. Commander Indus is dead. We have taken the bridge and the crew has surrendered." On the bridge of the Retribution, Aaron let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. "Well done, Lieutenant," he said, a note of pride in his voice. "Secure the prisoners and prepare to transfer them to the brig. We'll send over damage control teams to stabilize the Eternal Conquest." He turned to face his crew, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "We did it," he said, his voice soft but firm. "We've struck a blow against the Brunali that they won't soon forget. But this war is far from over. We've got a lot of work ahead of us." The crew nodded, their faces grim but determined. They knew the road ahead would be long and hard, filled with sacrifice and loss, but they also knew that they were fighting for something greater than themselves, for the future of their species and the galaxy as a whole. And with leaders like Admiral Lewis and warriors like Lieutenant Chen, they knew that they would prevail, no matter the cost. On the bridge of the Eternal Conquest, Razor kept his pulse rifle trained on Indus, the barrel still smoking from the shot that had brought the Brunali commander to his knees. Indus clutched at his wounded shoulder, his face contorted in a mix of pain and fury. "So you think you've won, human?" Indus spat, his voice thick with rage. "You know nothing of our struggle." Razor took a step forward, his finger tense on the trigger. "I know you attacked us without provocation. I know you slaughtered innocent civilians. That's all I need to know." To his surprise, Indus let out a bitter laugh. "You really believe that, don't you? That this war was about conquest or superiority?" The Brunali commander pulled himself to his feet, swaying slightly. "The truth is, human, our empire has been crumbling for decades. Strife, scarcity, rebellion. We were tearing ourselves apart." Razor frowned, not lowering his weapon. "What are you saying?" "I needed a way to unite my people, to give them a common purpose." Indus met Razor's gaze, his eyes burning with a fanatic light. "And then you humans appeared, with your primitive ships and your arrogant swagger. The perfect enemy to rally against." Razor's mind reeled at the implications. The entire war, all the death and destruction, had been nothing more than a ploy to keep the Brunali in line? It was almost too much to comprehend. For a moment he hesitated, struggling to process this revelation, and in that moment Indus struck. The Brunali commander lunged forward with surprising speed, his good hand lashing out to seize Razor's rifle. Razor cursed, trying to pull away, but Indus's grip was like iron. They grappled for control of the weapon, trading blows with their free hands. Razor drove a knee into Indus's midsection, feeling the alien's exoskeleton crack under the impact. Indus snarled and headbutted him in response, stars exploding across Razor's vision. Around them, the bridge descended into chaos. Brunali crew members, some loyal to Indus, others sensing an opportunity amid the confusion, turned on each other in a flurry of violence. Razor caught glimpses of the fighting in his peripheral vision as he struggled against Indus, but he couldn't afford to be distracted. Indus was strong, fueled by desperation and madness, but Razor had years of training and raw tenacity on his side. With a roar of effort, he wrenched the rifle free of Indus's grasp and brought the butt of the weapon down hard on the Brunali's temple. Indus crumpled, his eyes rolling back in his head. Razor stood over him, chest heaving, the rifle clutched in white-knuckled hands. "Lieutenant Chen to Admiral Lewis," he said, activating his comm. "Indus is in custody. The Eternal Conquest is ours." "Excellent work, Lieutenant," came Aaron's reply, his voice tight with tension. "But what's this about the war being a ruse?" Razor looked down at Indus's prone form, a bitter taste in his mouth. "You're not going to believe this, Admiral, but it seems we've been fighting the wrong battle all along." On the Retribution's bridge, Aaron listened to Razor's report with growing disbelief and horror. The true nature of the war, the depths of the Brunali's deception, it was almost too much to take in. He leaned back in his chair, his mind racing. If what Indus said was true, then this conflict was far more complex than they had ever imagined. Defeating the Brunali militarily was no longer enough. They needed to find a way to address the root causes of their aggression, to bring stability and unity to a fractured empire. It would require diplomacy, understanding, and a willingness to confront hard truths on both sides. The road ahead would be long and difficult, fraught with challenges and setbacks. But as Aaron looked out at the stars, at the wreckage of the Brunali fleet drifting amid the void, he knew they had no choice. They had to try, for the sake of both their peoples, for the future of the galaxy itself. The war had taken on a new dimension, and humanity would need to rise to the challenge. Aaron squared his shoulders, his voice steady as he gave his next order. "Bring Indus to the retribution. Let's see if we can find a way to end this conflict once and for all." Aaron sat in his quarters on the retribution, his mind racing with the implications of Indus's revelations. The war he had fought so hard to win was built on a foundation of lies and desperation, a last-ditch effort by a crumbling empire to hold itself together. He leaned forward, elbows resting on his knees, and closed his eyes. The weight of the lives lost, human and Brunali alike, hung heavy on his shoulders. There had to be a way to end this conflict, to find a path to peace. His eyes snapped open, a sudden clarity washing over him. He strode onto the bridge, his voice ringing out with newfound purpose. "Open a channel to all Brunali ships," he ordered. "We're calling for a ceasefire." The bridge crew exchanged surprised glances, but quickly set to work. Within moments, Aaron's image appeared on the view screens of every Brunali vessel. "Brunali commanders, this is Admiral Aaron Lewis of the Earth Defense Fleet," he began, his voice steady and firm. "In light of recent revelations about the true nature of this conflict, I am proposing an immediate ceasefire between our forces. I invite you to meet with us at a neutral location to discuss the possibility of peace negotiations." He paused, letting his words sink in. "We have all suffered greatly in this war. Let us come together not as enemies, but as sentient beings seeking a better future for our peoples. The choice is yours." The response was cautious, but several Brunali commanders, their faith in Indus shattered, agreed to the meeting. A remote, uninhabited planet was chosen as the site for the peace talks. As the human and Brunali delegates gathered on the planet's surface, the tension was palpable. Centuries of distrust and animosity hung in the air, threatening to poison any attempt at reconciliation. Aaron, keenly aware of the delicate nature of the situation, made a decision that stunned both his own people and the Brunali. Leaving his weapons and guards behind, he strode into the middle of the assembled delegates, alone and unarmed. "I come to you not as a conqueror," he said, his voice carrying across the silent gathering, "but as a fellow being who has known the pain and loss of war." He spoke of his own experiences, the friends and comrades he had lost, the toll the conflict had taken on his spirit. The Brunali listened, their expressions shifting from hostility to curiosity to the first glimmers of understanding. Slowly, hesitantly, they began to share their own stories, tales of hardship and suffering, of a society crumbling under the weight of its own decay, of the desperate hope that Indus had offered in the face of annihilation. As the hours passed, the barriers between human and Brunali began to erode. Common ground was found, empathy established. A fragile trust took root, nurtured by Aaron's willingness to listen and to understand. But even as the peace talks progressed, a new threat emerged. Drax, a hardline Brunali commander, refused to accept the idea of peace with the humans. Gathering a group of like-minded warriors, he broke away from the main Brunali contingent, determined to reignite the war. Drax and his followers launched a series of brutal guerrilla attacks, striking at both human and Brunali targets. They saw themselves as the true defenders of the Brunali way, and any who sought peace with the humans were traitors to be purged. Faced with this new crisis, Aaron and his Brunali counterparts were forced to put their newfound trust to the test. United by their commitment to peace, they began to coordinate their efforts, sharing intelligence and resources to counter Drax's insurgency. It was a fragile alliance, fraught with challenges and setbacks. But as they worked together, facing a common enemy, the bonds between human and Brunali grew stronger. The dream of peace, once a distant hope, began to take on the shape of reality. The war was far from over. Drax and his fanatics remained a deadly threat, determined to plunge both species back into the abyss of conflict. But for the first time, there was a glimmer of hope, a chance for a future free from the cycle of hatred and violence. Aaron looked out over the war-torn landscape, his resolve hardening. He had started this journey as a soldier, fighting for the survival of his people. Now, he would finish it as a peacemaker, striving to build a new era of understanding between human and Brunali. The path ahead was uncertain, fraught with danger and challenges. But with each step, each small victory, the dream of peace grew a little closer, and for now that was enough. Razor lowered his rifle, a chill running down his spine as he took in the true scope of Indus's revelations. He signaled his team to secure the disoriented Brunali commander. As they marched the captive Indus through the ruined corridors of the Eternal Conquest, Aaron's voice crackled over the comm. "Razor, report." "Indus is in custody," Razor replied, his voice tight. "But there's something you need to know." The journey back to the Retribution was a blur, Razor's mind reeling with the implications of Indus's confession. The Brunali had been tearing themselves apart long before humanity ever entered the picture. This war, all the death and suffering, had been nothing more than a desperate ploy to hold a crumbling empire together. As Razor stepped onto the Retribution's bridge, he found Aaron deep in conversation with a striking Brunali female, her bearing that of a seasoned warrior. Aaron turned, his expression grave. "This is Zara, one of the Brunali commanders who agreed to the ceasefire," he said. "She has troubling news." Zara stepped forward, her eyes hard. "A splinter faction of our people, led by a warlord named Drax, has rejected the peace talks. They see any cooperation with humans as betrayal and have vowed to continue the war." Aaron's jaw tightened. "We can't let Drax's faction derail the peace process. If we don't stop them, this cycle of violence will never end." "Agreed," Zara said, "which is why we have a plan. A joint human-Brunali strike team infiltrating Drax's base to take them down from within." Razor felt the weight of her gaze fall upon him. "We need our best for this, Razor. Warriors who can adapt, think on their feet. Warriors like you." He met her eyes, seeing in them the same determination, the same weariness of war that he felt in his own heart. "I'm in." The strike team assembled quickly, a mix of battle-hardened humans and Brunali, united by a common purpose. They would pose as disillusioned warriors, seeking to join Drax's cause and tear his operation apart from the inside. As they boarded the sleek, unmarked ship that would carry them to Drax's hidden base, Razor felt a sense of grim anticipation. This was their chance to end this conflict once and for all, to pave the way for a future free from the cycle of hatred and retribution. The ship sliced through the void, carrying them towards a remote, storm-ravaged planet on the fringes of Brunali space. Razor checked and rechecked his gear, his mind running through the countless scenarios they might face. Beside him, his teammates did the same, a silent ritual of preparation. They touched down on the planet's surface, the ship's camouflage systems rendering it virtually invisible against the jagged rocks and swirling dust. Razor and his team disembarked, their armor and weapons modified to mimic those of Drax's followers. With a final nod to each other, they set off towards the base, ready to play their roles, to become the enemy in order to defeat them. The fate of two species, the hope for peace, rested on their shoulders. As they approached the base's perimeter, Razor steeled himself for the challenges ahead. They would need all their skill, all their cunning, to see this mission through. But he knew, with a certainty that burned in his heart, that they would not fail. They could not. The price of failure was too high. The strike team passed through the base's outer defenses, their disguises holding up under the scrutiny of Drax's guards. They were in. Now, the real work would begin. Razor and his teammates dispersed throughout the base, each taking on a different role, a different avenue of sabotage. They gathered in shadows and whispered in corners, planting seeds of doubt, fanning the flames of dissent. Slowly, subtly, they began to unravel the fabric of Drax's operation. As they worked, Aaron and Zara led a series of lightning raids against Drax's supply lines, guided by the intelligence the strike team fed them. Each strike weakened Drax's position, eroding his support among his followers. But even as they made progress, Razor couldn't shake the feeling that they were balanced on a knife's edge. One misstep, one moment of carelessness, and everything could come crashing down. That moment came when Drax, his paranoia reaching a fever pitch, uncovered the presence of the infiltrators. His rage was terrifying to behold, his orders for their immediate execution chilling the blood. Razor and his team, their cover blown, were forced to fight. They battled their way through the base, desperately seeking an escape, as Drax's loyalists closed in around them. Plasma fire scorched the air, the screams of the wounded and dying echoing through the corridors. In the chaos, Razor found himself face to face with Drax himself. The warlord was a towering figure, his eyes burning with hate, his massive fists clenched in rage. "Traitor!" Drax snarled, his voice dripping with venom. "You dare to infiltrate my ranks, to poison my people against me?" Razor raised his fists, his heart pounding in his chest. "Your war is based on a lie, Drax. Indus confessed everything. This ends now." Drax let out a roar of fury and charged, his massive form hurtling towards Razor with terrifying speed. Razor met him head-on, ducking under a crushing blow and driving his fist into Drax's midsection. The two warriors clashed in a brutal dance of strikes and counterstrikes, each pushing the other to the limits of their strength and endurance. Razor could feel his muscles screaming, his lungs burning as he fought, but he refused to yield. With a final, desperate effort, Razor saw an opening. He lunged forward, his fist connecting with Drax's jaw in a sickening crunch. The warlord staggered, his eyes glazing over, and then he fell, his massive form crashing to the ground. Around them, the battle raged on, but Razor could see the tide turning. With their leader fallen, Drax's followers began to waver, some throwing down their weapons in surrender, others fleeing into the storm-swept wilds outside the base. Razor stood over Drax's unconscious form, his chest heaving, his knuckles bruised and bloodied. It was over. They had won. As the dust settled on the ruins of Drax's base, Razor looked out over the war-torn landscape, a sense of grim satisfaction mingling with the weight of all that had been lost. The rogue faction was broken, its leader defeated, but the cost had been high. Good soldiers, human and Brunali alike, had fallen in the struggle for peace. Razor turned to his teammates, their armor battered and scorched, their faces etched with the same mix of exhaustion and resolution that he felt in his own heart. "We did it," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "But the real work starts now." In the weeks that followed, as the news of Drax's defeat spread, the peace negotiations between the humans and Brunali took on a new urgency. Aaron and Zara, their reputations cemented by their roles in bringing an end to the war, worked tirelessly to bridge the gap between their peoples. They met in neutral locations, hammering out the details of a treaty that would lay the foundation for a lasting peace. Long hours were spent in heated discussions, each side struggling to let go of the prejudices and mistrust that had defined their relationship for so long. But even as the talks progressed, a new revelation threatened to upend everything they had worked for. A joint human-Brunali expedition, scouring the ruins of a long-abandoned Brunali research facility, stumbled upon a cache of ancient artifacts and technologies that predated the rise of both civilizations. Among the dusty relics and crumbling data drives, they found evidence that shook the very foundations of their understanding. Genetic analyses, archaeological records, and fragmentary historical accounts all pointed to a single shocking conclusion. Humans and Brunali shared a common ancestor. The two species, so long divided by hatred and violence, were more closely related than either had ever imagined. News of the discovery spread like wildfire, sparking a firestorm of controversy and debate. Some factions on both sides, unable to accept this newfound kinship, railed against the evidence, dismissing it as a hoax or a ploy to undermine their way of life. Protests erupted in the streets of human and Brunali cities, angry voices calling for a return to the old ways, for a rejection of this unwelcome truth. Extremist groups, once thought vanquished, re-emerged from the shadows, seizing upon the chaos to push their agendas of separation and supremacy. Amid the turmoil, Aaron and Zara found themselves at the center of a political and social maelstrom, their hard-won alliance threatened by the very revelation that should have brought their people together. They worked around the clock, meeting with leaders and activists on both sides, struggling to calm the rising tensions and keep the peace process on track. In private moments, stolen between the endless rounds of negotiations and public appearances, they confided in each other their fears and doubts. They had fought so hard, sacrificed so much to bring their people to this point. The thought of seeing it all unravel now was almost too much to bear. But even as they grappled with the weight of their responsibilities, they drew strength from each other and from the knowledge that they were not alone. Across the stars, on countless worlds, humans and Brunali were coming together, driven by a shared desire for understanding and unity. And on the front lines of this new struggle, Razor and his team continued to fight, not with weapons but with words and ideas. They traveled from planet to planet, meeting with those who had once been their enemies, sharing their stories and their vision of a future, where humans and Brunali stood together as one. It was a battle unlike any they had fought before, a war for hearts and minds rather than territory or resources. But they knew that it was a fight they could not afford to lose. The future of their species, of the galaxy itself, hung in the balance. As Razor boarded a transport ship, bound for yet another distant world, he paused to look back at the planet he had called home for so long. The scars of war were still visible, the wounds of the past not yet fully healed. But beneath the surface, he could sense a new spirit stirring, a fragile but growing hope for a better tomorrow. He knew that the road ahead would be long and difficult, that there would be setbacks and challenges at every turn, but he also knew that he and his comrades would not rest until their work was done, until the dream of a united human Brunali civilization was made real. With a final nod to the world he was leaving behind, Razor stepped aboard the ship, ready to face whatever lay ahead. The war may have been over, but the struggle for peace was only just beginning. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.